You are looking at one of the cheapest V8 running M3s in the world right here. And a big reason for that, almost 300,000 kilometers on the clock, and most importantly, zero service history. No rod bearings, nothing. Today, we're gonna find out together just how bad this engine is and can we save it with rod bearings and a whole bunch of other preventative maintenance. Stick around. She sounds a little rough. Let's see if we can fix her up. And rise. Beautiful. Give it the old shake test. Solid as a rock. Come to Papa. No shavings on the drain plug. That's a very promising sign. All right, enough pissing. I'm gonna take off the oil pan anyway. All right, let's see the state of this oil filter. Let's take a look. You can see there's a little bit of dirt particles, but nothing shiny. And that's what's most important. We got a good one. Nope, not gonna say that. Not gonna jinx it. Oh yeah, there we go. Behold, 8 glorious butterflies. All right, next up, we're gonna bag them and tag them. You obviously don't want any fluids or any objects falling in here. Right, let the degreasing begin. It's not museum quality, but at least it's clean enough that we can start working around here, unplugging some things, get to the injectors and these leaking valve cover gaskets. Let's empty this bad boy so we can get this reservoir out of here. What do we think? Is that a good coolant color? Yuck. And there's a coolant sensor on the bottom. These connectors off. This line out of there. Come on, you bastard. There we go. All right, well, that's one side done. Gonna disconnect these wires for the injectors. Now there's some pins over here. You wanna gently pry the pin open, and then the connector should slide off. Tuck this guy up and out of the way. Don't mind the back of my head. Jesus, is this thing baked on or what? Ah! There we go. Oh yes, look at that. Varnish, anyone? So take a look for yourselves. 300,000 kilometers, camshafts, perfect, no scoring. Again, just considering the neglected nature of this car, that's just a testament to BMW M engineering. That is spectacular. Now that we've got the cylinder holes nicely exposed, I'm going to throw in some fogging oil, especially when you're going to be turning the engine over by hand, doing the rod bearings. Obviously there's no oil in the engine, so you want to make sure that the pistons are nicely lubricated. Now let's cover up the patient and move on to the other side. First thing I'm going to do is I want to move this guy out of the way. So let's go down below and drain the rad. Why was I so lazy not to lift the car? Now abracadabra, let's cover up the patient on this side as well. I'm going to tuck him into bed for tonight. Back tomorrow. And now it's time to tackle this greasy, disgusting mess. As you can see, there is so much caked on oil and varnish on the inside of these valve covers. Not to mention on the outside, looking pretty scummy and disgusting as well. So first thing I'm going to do is obviously take off the gaskets. I'm going to take off the sensors on top. And then we're going to spend some quality time with our good old friend, kerosene. And after about an hour of scrubbing, here's the result, before and after. Now, before any of you start blasting me in the comments as to why I didn't repaint these valve covers to a fresh new paint job on the outside, to that I'm gonna say, let's just make sure the engine's not gonna blow up. Okay. Now you wanna make sure this mating surface is nice and clean, and then we're gonna put some RTV on these two joints right here. Before we close this up, I'm gonna give some oil for the homies on the camshafts. Again, why am I doing this? We're gonna be hand rotating the crank a bunch of times doing the rod bearings, and this engine was open for a couple of days. Tiny bit of gasket maker, make sure it's oil resistant. Oh yeah, you might want to lube up these guys slightly, makes it easier to seat in there. Very important, you got to start from the middle and work your way out in a crisscross pattern. That way this rubber gasket is going to seat nice and smooth. Good, and this bank is done. Rinse and repeat, and done. The last step we're gonna do up here as part of preventative maintenance is change out the fuel injectors. So Mickey, step aside. There's a T27, I believe, here and over here. And then we're gonna lift the injectors out. There goes one. They've got these little clips here. You kind of push them out. You wanna have lots of rags handy, because tons of fuel is going to spill out. So here's what a 300,000 kilometer M3 injector looks like. These were still operational to some extent, obviously. The car was running. But again, these are known to basically stay stuck in the open state, keep flooding your cylinder until the whole thing goes kablamo. So this is definitely some cheap preventative maintenance. This was about 500 bucks Canadian to swap out all 8 with OE Bosch. So now I'm going to take the rest off of this rail, spill a whole bunch of fuel, try not to spill it inside the engine, and get some new ones. Now before I reinstall these, you want to make sure that these holes are nice and clean. So I just spent 20 minutes kind of picking away all this black crap off of it. So that's what a clean injector hole looks like. And here's what an unclean one looks like on the other side. Well, there's the top end refreshed. Now it's time to put my big boy pants on. It's rod bearing time. Snake that out. Time to release the tensioners for the belts. Ever seen a pulley with this many gouges? Not the worst in the world. Time for the alternator belt. Oh, that guy was on there tight. This belt is definitely new. All right, now that we got this cleaned up, time to do some unboxing. Guesses below on what you think that is. I love how they didn't even include instructions in this thing. How manly. Sorry, how him of them. If this goes catastrophically wrong, at least we'll have it on camera. Pay attention. That's not going anywhere. And now we want to lift this up actually probably about a centimeter or two because when the engine mounts are toast on this motor, the motor drops actually quite a lot. So I want to put some upward tension on the engine. Check that that's holding steady. Good, solid. Now it's time to shut the hood. Gonna cover this pokey bit here. That's not gonna go anywhere. Good. Now we're going to employ the M technique. And one. And who are we kidding? It weighs nothing. Can I just say I want to be entered in the BMW Hall of Fame for the nastiest subframe, pan, whatever the hell you want to call this thing. Jesus Christ, just look at the state of this. Turns out it's actually metal under there, not made out of mud. Check that out. Oh yeah. Oh, there's the big boy. Moving on to the back. All right, next I marked up on the steering column exactly where those two pieces are going to come back together. Now it's time to undo that nut and loosen the steering column away from the spline. Spline? Spleen? Ah, potato, potato. Breaker bar time. Lastly, these lines up front gotta get loosened. Or, you know, you could just snap the rusty bolt. That's always an option. Now let's try and unbolt this son of a bitch. Almost forgot the ground strap. Behold the genius of my plan. Oh yeah. The M3 is literally going to support itself. That's about as stable as a drunk Sherpa. Let's carry on. Let's zip tie these guys out of the way. Man drops subframe on his head in 3, 2, 1. There we go. My leaning tower of 2x4s. Leaning tower of 2x4s has done its job. Okay, sit rep. I've successfully parallel parked the subframe on the side of the garage, as you can see. Now we're finally closer to having a look at those rod bearings. Oh yes. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the bottom end of a almost 300,000 kilometer M3 S65. Whew. There we go. All right, now that we got full access to these beauties, there is one cylinder actually, cylinder number 8, that is at bottom dead center and is going to be super easy to get these caps off. I'm dying to see what these look like. Guess what? Those are original BMW rod bolts. There is a chance here that these are original rod bearings from 2008. Hold your breath. Let's see. Gingerly. What? All right, so remember I was saying those are original BMW bolts. Have a look at this rod bearing. It looks, I mean, it looks pretty damn spectacular. My guess is these were changed, but let's take a look just to be sure. Push it out sideways. Not sure how well you can see. 088089. 088089 is the original serial production rod bearings, the version 1 that BMW used. It hasn't worn through the copper, although I should add, over here right at the edge, it's actually quite a bit worn out. And here is the upper color me flabbergasted. 088, 089. These are the original bearings with 286,000 kilometers on them, 175,000 miles. This is nuts. This goes to show you what proper oil changes, high quality oils. The previous owner used Liqui-Moly exclusively for the last 10 years. That's what that'll do. Just to give you an idea of how tight it is in here, this is the space you've got to work with to slide that upper bearing on. It's pretty tight. I'm going to give it my best shot, but obviously the camera is not going to be able to pick up much for you guys, unfortunately. What is really important is the crankshaft journal looks super mint, very clean, no issues here. Again, I'm just staggered. 286,000 kilometers, everything you hear and see about S65s, and look at it, here it is. It's mint, it's perfect. I just want to show you what so I stuck the bearing back on. You want to make sure that bearing is super flush with the end of the rod cap. That is going to make all the difference in the world. If you do not do that, it is going to scratch and you are going to have one messy problem in a couple kilometers time. I'm going to stick some assembly lube on there, put it back down, go for the lube. All right, so now we're going to pull it back. Got it nicely lubed up with assembly lube. Now I'm going to gently pull it back. Again, just being ultra careful that I don't scratch the journal. The key here is finesse and taking your time. We're seated. The bearing looks flush with the cap. Now we can get our bottom one. Now, as far as these ones go, you want to make sure your gloves are ultra clean for this. I've got clean microfiber cloths that I'm constantly wiping my hands with and my gloves, and if I see any trace of dirt or anything, or if I accidentally put my hand on the ground where it's super dirty, I just swap out my gloves. So now we're going to grab one of our lower bearings, and as you can see there's a notch here. What we're going to do is line it up with this notch, and from what I've seen, the best way to do it is you just place your thumb here, you push down, and it seats into place. And it should be quite flat. And you can always kind of wriggle it around, but you want to make sure that one of them isn't at a peak. Obviously I cleaned this cap nicely before I did that. And now we're going to stick a dollop of assembly lube. Don't be shy. Now that's step one. The second step is we want to prep our bolts. Take our ARP assembly lube fastener. We're going to coat the top just like that. And now these go in a very specific direction. So there's only, as you can see, there's a number over here, and that's supposed to match the number on the other end of the connecting rod. This is a forged one piece that is then cracked and kind of split. That's why this end is so jagged here. But of course, you already knew that. So now let's go underneath. Got one bolt pre-started, pre-lubed. And there we go, we're in. And bolt number 2. Torque wrench time, 50 foot-pounds. Go bit by bit. There's 50. There's 50. Now I'm going to take a Sharpie and mark the bolts so that I know that those are tightened down and good to go. That was the first one I've done. Now for the rest of them, what I'm going to do is I'm going to crank over the engine by hand, clockwise of course. And what I want to do ideally is line up both of these so that I can do 2 of them at the same time. I was so excited to see what this is going to look like that I just did cylinder number 8 first, but cylinder 1 is super close to being able to be done as well. So now cylinder 1 is perfectly in line. We're going to do that one next. All right, here's number 1. More or less similar story. definitely overdue for a change. 1,000 apologies, I misidentified these as cylinder 2. They're actually cylinder 8. Spare me in the comments section. Now let's carry on. Fresh bearing going in. What's also incredible, given the kilometers and the mileage, is have a look at those cylinder walls. They are absolutely mint. Again, 300,000 kilometers, just wild that it is in such good shape. So here we are, they are all out, and as you can see, there's definite signs of copper wear, especially on the top ones. They were all actually quite uniform, especially the top, but 7 was really living close to the edge. That thing was living off borrowed time, and I think one hard pull in cold oil and that thing probably would have spun. So I think I just about managed to save this nearly 300,000 kilometer original bearing S65 motor. I can't believe I'm just saying that right now. One last set of bearings. Let's get this done. Whew. That actually wasn't that bad. The hardest part was actually getting up, down, in and out from under the car. There's 16 of these. For every single one of them, you got to get up and down 6 times. It's a bit of a squat workout, but as many others have said, the hardest part is actually just getting to the rod bolts, not doing them themselves. It's just slow, very methodical, kind of painstakingly detailed work. You just want to really, really take your time with it, not rush it, and triple check everything. Now I'm probably going to drink a bit, take a shower, and start reassembling. Now I'm going to release the last 2 engine drain bolts for the coolant, which are right behind the last cylinders up underneath the exhaust manifold. Bah. Yeah, here we go. Steady stream of piss coming down. Good thing I wore glasses. München, we have a problem. So for anybody who's curious, if you want to see where the engine coolant drain plug is, it is that sucker right there. And on the other side, it is right up there. Now, this guy, for whatever reason, is not rusty and didn't strip. This guy up here, the hex head has stripped. All right, München, time to extract you, you bastard. Behold my Bosch extraction squad. These are, I guess, flute or spiral types of extractors. You stick them in and then you turn counterclockwise. This cuts into the hole and then spins whatever bolt you have stuck out of place. Sorry I can't show this to you. The space is tight enough as it is. Come on, bite, you bastard. Broke him loose. All right, so here is what is left of this thing. I completely chewed through the hex at the back here. And so I actually tried finding this part, these drain plugs for the coolant and the block, through real OEM. I contacted BMW. Nobody knows what the hell this part is. And unfortunately, I was a bit stuck. So I ended up kind of MacGyvering this. What I did was I measured the threads using my tool and die set, and this is an M10 times 1.0 millimeter thread. And all I did was I Googled M10 times 1.0 drain plug. And to my surprise, I got really lucky because there is a company here in Toronto that makes aluminum drain plugs and all kinds of other kind of machined hardware. And it even includes this nice aluminum washer. The company, if you're wondering, and they do distribute all over North America, is called Racetronics. Racetronics with an X at the end. If you want, check them out. By no means is this sponsored. I literally just stumbled on them doing a desperate Google search for this part. Let's see if this works. So that was easy peasy. I ended up swapping out both sides. Here's the driver's side, and here's the passenger side. And now for the most thankless job of all, cleaning this oil pan. So first I'm going to get underneath and drain a bunch of oil that's remaining in these pools over here. And there we go, let that drain out. I'm going to put back the old drain plug. The hole is here at the back, so I'm just lifting it. There's quite a little catching pool in there. Put the old one back just temporarily. And now I'm going to fill this up with kerosene. You want to wear a mask while you're doing this. This stuff is quite stinky, but I'm going to let this sit overnight and kind of bake into the bottom sludge. Then tomorrow I'm going to drain this and it's going to come out a lot cleaner. You can also use gasoline for this. I just happen to have kerosene. Going to give it a bit of a swish. While I'm here, we're going to change this oil level sensor. Brand new OEM, also Temic. Just good and tight on this. It's a rubber gasket. When you feel it bottoming out, that's when it's far enough. Gonna replace these washers too. These are 25 Newton meters or 18 foot-pounds. Oil pan gasket time. Zip tie trick. Operation wheel this thing in begins. And right away we've got a problem. For the DIYer, the step stool method is best. I really need one of my trusty 2x4s. Yes. Jesus Christ, this is a lot harder than I thought. Whew, that was rough. Thanks, Step Ladder. That sounded like Sepp Blatter. Anyway, don't want to thank that guy. Now, this is a metal gasket, so you don't really have to go kind of in a particular order, but I'm going to start in the middle and go kind of X. And this is 10 Newton meters, so I'm just going to go by hand until I feel it bottoming out. Time for the Torx bolts. Super light torque on these, 14 foot-pounds. Time for the bracket. Done. Time to wheel over my subframe contraption. Now I'm going to replace the seals in here because, as you can see, this thing was a tsunami of leaking. First I'm going to take off this shield, close off those banjo bolts a little bit. Oh, look at that, there's a white sensor under there. Look at the amount of dirt that is on there. That is just savage. Who knows how long this thing has been leaking for. Talk about weight savings. By the way, if any of you are mortified that I'm doing this on top of my rims, don't worry, they're getting refinished. Let's see if we can hammer this out. And Bob's your uncle. Maybe replace a bit of this grease, and certainly there's a bunch of O-rings in here. Gonna replace those. All right, so we got our old motor mounts over here, fresh set of new ones over here. Now these don't appear to be too bad. They're not like crazy cracked or anything. However, if you put them side by side, you can see just how collapsed this one is compared to a new one. So even though they don't look cracked, it's always a good idea whenever you're taking out the subframe to replace these. They're really not that expensive and cheap insurance. I'm going to clean up the mating surface over here. Want it to be nice and smooth. Got another one down here. You want to mount these to the subframe because they've got these little dowels over here. And I'm just going to bolt them from underneath. I'm not going to torque them yet until they're on the car. Motor mount is coming in. Steering shaft. Yes. Steering shaft nut is finally in. See those two marks lining up? That's what we were looking for. Now I can start doing up the motor mounts. Here's my ingenious setup of delicate balance and stupidity. All the subframe bolts are 80 foot-pounds. Engine mounts are 40 foot-pounds. Now, because my tie rods are completely shot and this is welded, completely seized, I'm going to take off the inner and the outer tie rod. Now I got one of these tie rod puller tools off Amazon. Get an old breaker bar. There we go. How easy and elegant was that? New one coming in. New software. Give that a wiggle. Time for the tie rod end. I'm going to tighten this up, and the alignment shop is going to have to fine tune that anyway. But this is close enough for now. And the other side. And done. Power steering lines, 20 and 22 foot-pounds for the two bolts. The banjos, that is. Next up, I'm going to take off these sway bar bushings. The sway bar is pretty nasty, but frankly, these bushings gotta go. When in doubt, cut it out. As you can see, the rubber here is all cracked, and over here as well. This is the point at which you wish you had a sandblaster box. But nay, not in this tiny ass garage. BMW bushings. These are the bottoms. We're in on one side. And we're in on the other. Clicked in on both sides. The torque for the 10 millimeters is 60 Newton meters or 44 foot-pounds. All right, well, for a second there, I thought all was lost. See this bolt here as I was tightening the nut for the sway bar. This other one back here just completely sheared off. Now I gathered myself for a second and then I thought, okay, this is solid aluminum. I'm gonna drill out a hole and tap some threads in here. And that's exactly what I've done. And now this M8 bolt that I had laying around perfectly threads in here. So there's a lesson for you. If you do snap a bolt like this or anything else, there's always a workaround. You just gotta have some patience. And in my case, I was lucky enough that I've got a tap and die set and some good drill bits, and I was able to bust that out. Now, fingers crossed, this bolts up properly. Using my bald head as a stopper. Now I'm gonna do it up by hand. Haha! We are in, baby. How good does that feel? Back in. Nice. Torque with the wheel at ride height. So the last piece of the puzzle is this little arm that goes to the headlight level sensor over here on the driver's side. As you can see, this one is completely immobilized. It's completely full of rust. It's, anyway, headlights are not working properly, so new one going in. And that's the finishing touch on the suspension done. Now we can drop the car. Hello old friend. Been a while. By the way, have a look at how loose this is. That just goes to show you how much more the engine got raised when we put in the fresh motor mounts. First things first, let's get some fresh oil in you. There we go. Now because I drained every last drop of oil out of this engine, including out of the pan and out of the oil filter housing, I put in 9.5 liters just to be on the safe side. Otherwise, most oil changes you do 9 liters on this engine. Now let's hand rotate the crank. Success. No weird noises. Engine spins smoothly and freely. Now we can start buttoning everything back up. Gonna swap out the power steering reservoir. It's got a filter in there. This fluid was more brown than green, to be honest, so just cheap preventative maintenance. Take off some clips. Swap this bracket over. Fresh one going in. CHF 11S only on this motor. Before I forget, oil filter, O-rings on the bottom and at the top. New filter. Done. So now it's time to do the belts and the pulleys, and for me this is something that I can never seem to get right. So I reached out to my friends at eManuals Online. They're one of the world's largest official OEM manual distributors online, and they hooked me up with 2003 M3 E90 official BMW manual, and I've got a link in the description where you can get 22% off anything on the site up until April 2024, so check them out. This is the real deal, 4,000 pages of mechanical goodness. This is what the BMW techs use themselves, and as an added bonus, if you get the one for $42.99, obviously without the discount, you get ISTA Plus, which is awesome because this is where they house all the torque settings for everything. It's not actually in the BMW manual. That would be far too easy and simple for the Germans. And the added benefit is you get ISTA Plus. So now that this is going to tell us how to do this properly, let's crack on. So first I'm going to take off this pulley for the water pump, which I mistakenly did not remove when I took this off the first time because I did not have the manual. So I'm going to use the trick of using the old belt, and it works splendidly. All right, I've got a brand new Scheifler ENA pulley, and you can buy this whole thing for like 250 bucks US from BMW. I have a feeling this thing is fine because the belt wasn't chirping or making any issues. So I sourced these specifically. These are much cheaper. These are about $30 a piece. Belt coming in. Now the AC and power steering belt. Over, under, in and out. That's what belt tying is all about. Now let's try rotating the crank a few times. Spark plug time. I'm using the Laser Platinum NGK-Rs. Time for the fan. Coolant hose. And now the expansion tank. Top up the coolant. BMW Blue. Pre-mixed 50-50 with distilled water. And the final step before we put the intake manifold back on is you see all that kind of black deposit of soot around the edges of the throttle butterfly. I'm going to take some throttle cleaner and some Q-tips and just clean very carefully along these edges. And here's the after. As you can see, those edges are looking a lot less gummed up now. Manifold incoming. Looks good. Okay, Judgment Day. Time to start the car. I'm not nervous, right? Okay, first thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to crank it a few times with the fuel off just to build some oil pressure in the motor. Then I'm going to put the fuel pump relay back in and we're going to fire this thing up, hopefully. Not nervous at all. Fuel relay is back in. Now it's real do or die time. This is going to take a long time to crank because all the fuel dripped out when I was doing the fuel injectors anyway, so this might take a while. Talk about smoke. It's definitely running rough. Not good. Not good. Let's try that again. Prognosis. Rough. Rough. It almost feels like it's misfiring or something. Stay tuned. So, I pulled the plugs. Now, you tell me, what's the difference between these four and these four? The difference is, these four haven't fired at all, from what you can see, because they look brand spanking new. And these ones over here have. And these were on bank 1, and these were on bank 2. Bank 1, bank 2. Now what's interesting is the previous owner had put both of these grounding straps on the same screw. And over here, they are at separate points. So it could be as simple as a grounding issue because none of these wires are getting any kind of power and none of those spark plugs are firing. So this thing was basically running on one bank of cylinders and not the other. No wonder it was running like balls, to be honest. So now I'm going to put that where it needs to be, which is on the other side down there. Right, so I've got the ground strap properly put on now. One over here, one back here. The last thing I want to do is just make sure that this bank of butterflies opens. So let the fat lady sing. Both banks work. Let's put everything back, see how it runs now. Trying not to blow up the engine, part 2. Yes! Oh, we got smoke. Some of the silicone spray that I put on over here for the box to come down a little bit easier fell onto the exhaust manifold. No biggie, but the car runs sweet as a peach. Both banks running nice, engine running smooth, happy days. So this is going to be it. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far, you're a champ, or you either have nothing else to do with your time because this was a gargantuan amount of work. Next episode is very exciting because I'm going to try and do something that 99% of automotive YouTubers just will not try and touch. They don't know it. They're scared of it, but I will attempt to, I guess. Anyway, stick around to find out. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Ciao.